On today's episode, an Alfa Romeo that forgot how to be an Alfa, a Renault that looked modern but felt cheaply assembled, and a Volvo that dressed like a sports car before driving like something that wanted no part in the conversation. But which of these three automotive letdowns did the best job of turning high expectations into crushing regret? This is Four Wheels and Fuel. Let's find out.
Un'auto che nasce per viaggiare veloce e sicura, nasce intorno al suo cuore, Alfa 33, con motore boxer a 4 cilindri orizzontali contrapposti. Perché boxer vuol dire una vita più lunga per il motore, una silenziosità maggiore per voi, la sicurezza e la tenuta di un Alfa Romeo. Alfa 33 è uno stile di guida, perché il boxer è di razza.
Alfa Romeo 33. Replacing a great car is difficult. Replacing one of the most beloved small cars Europe had ever produced and somehow making everything worse takes a special kind of talent. Which brings us to the Alfa Romeo 33. Because when Alfa launched the 33 in 1983, buyers expected greatness. After all, this was the successor to the Alfa Sud, a car that had earned genuine admiration from journalists and enthusiasts alike. Yes, the Alfa Sud rusted with alarming enthusiasm. Yes, quality control occasionally appeared optional. But underneath those flaws sat one of the finest driving small cars of its generation. The 33 was supposed to keep everything people loved and fix everything they hated. Instead, Alfa somehow achieved the exact opposite. The first problem was weight. The 33 arrived heavier than the car it replaced, and it felt it. The sharpness that had made the Alfa Sud so entertaining began disappearing almost immediately. The steering lacked the same delicacy. The chassis lacked the same balance. The entire driving experience felt diluted, as though somebody had taken a brilliant sports hatchback and carefully removed most of its personality. Which was impressive, because keeping the flaws proved much easier. Rust still remained a concern. Electrical gremlins continued appearing with depressing regularity. Build quality still felt inconsistent. Owners discovered that many of the problems associated with the Alfa Sud had survived the transition perfectly intact. The strengths, unfortunately, had not. That became the 33's greatest achievement. It managed to inherit yesterday's problems while misplacing yesterday's brilliance. Even the styling struggled to compensate. The facelifted 1986 model looked a bit sharper than before, but appearances only helped until the road became interesting. Push the car harder and the disappointment quickly reveals itself. The handling never feels as precise as buyers expected. The chassis never delivers the confidence promised by the badge. And the entire experience leaves you wondering how a company famous for building drivers' cars managed to create something so uninspiring. On paper, Alfa still knew how to write a convincing brochure. The 1.5-litre boxer engine produced 104 horsepower and pushed the 33 to 60 miles per hour in 9.8 seconds, before the speedometer eventually wandered past 115 miles per hour. Not bad, not embarrassing, not slow, just completely missing the point. Because nobody walks into an Alfa showroom hoping for adequacy. They want something that makes them grin like an idiot. The 33 mostly made them miss the Alfa Sud. This was an Alfa Romeo. Special was supposed to be the minimum requirement. Instead, owners received a car that felt like a downgrade wearing a famous badge. And that's why the Alfa Romeo 33 belongs on this list. Not because it was the worst car money could buy, because it might have been the most disappointing. In 1986, a 33 1.5 QV cost roughly £8,000, which meant buyers could spend serious money on a car that somehow kept the Alfa Sud's weaknesses while leaving most of its magic behind. If you enjoy these automotive stories, you can support 4 Wheels and Fuel by buying me a coffee. Just click the link on screen or scan the QR code. Every bit of support helps keep the research and storytelling going. Let's continue.
Feel its luxury. Feel its power. Feel good once again about driving in the new Renault 21. Renault 21. At last, there's spirit in a family car.
Renault 21. Some disappointments take years to reveal themselves. The Renault 21 managed it almost immediately. When Renault unveiled the 21 at the Geneva Motor Show in 1986, it looked exactly like the sort of car buyers wanted. The styling came from Giorgetto Giugiaro, one of the most respected designers in the industry. The proportions were modern, the shape looked clean and sophisticated. Compared with many aging family saloons still cluttering European showrooms, the Renault appeared refreshingly contemporary. Unfortunately, appearances were doing most of the heavy lifting. Because the moment owners started living with the car, the cracks began appearing everywhere. The cabin was the first warning sign. Plastics felt cheap, switches lacked precision, trim pieces developed rattles long before they had any right to. Every journey seemed to introduce a new squeak, vibration, or reminder that Renault's quality control department had apparently been operating under severe time pressure. The deeper owners looked, the worse things became. Cooling system faults quickly became a familiar complaint. Build quality varied from car to car. Panel fit often felt inconsistent. And while none of the problems were individually catastrophic, they combined into something almost more damaging: a complete lack of confidence. Because family car buyers weren't looking for excitement. They wanted competence. They wanted reliability. They wanted the reassuring feeling that somebody had assembled the vehicle properly. The Renault struggled to provide any of those things. What made the situation especially painful was that the car arrived at exactly the wrong moment. By the mid-1980s, buyers were becoming less forgiving. Japanese manufacturers were proving that reliability mattered. German manufacturers were proving that quality mattered. Meanwhile, Renault seemed determined to demonstrate how many shortcuts could fit into one family saloon. Even on the road, the problems continued. The steering felt vague. The chassis lacked polish. High-speed refinement never quite matched the image Renault was trying to project. Every aspect of the driving experience felt unfinished, as though development had ended several months before the car was actually ready. On paper, the Renault seemed entirely sensible. The 2-litre engine produced 120 brake horsepower and pushed the car to 60 miles per hour in 9.5 seconds before eventually reaching 121 miles per hour. Not slow, not embarrassing, not exciting either. And once the plastics started creaking and the quality issues began introducing themselves, performance became the least interesting thing about the car. Respectable numbers, completely irrelevant once the rest of the car started disappointing you. And that's what made the Renault 21 such a frustrating failure. It looked modern. It sounded competitive. It promised progress. Then owners discovered that underneath the attractive styling sat a car that often felt cheaper, older, and less durable than the brochure suggested. In 1986, a Renault 21 TXE cost roughly £8,500, which meant buyers could spend serious money on a family saloon that started lowering expectations almost from the moment they drove it home. If American horsepower and V8 thunder sound more appealing to you, check out 4 Wheels and Fuel USA. Link is in the description.
Den holländska Volvo 480 ES presenterades 1985. Volvos första modell med framhjulsdrift. En 2-dörrars fyrsitsig sportig modell med en 4-cylindrig motor på 102 hästkrafter. Drygt 80 000 bilar tillverkades fram till 1995.
Volvo 480. The Volvo 480 might be the most confusing car on this list, because everything about it suggested excitement. The styling looked exciting, the badge suggested quality, the pop-up headlights practically screamed sports car. And when Volvo unveiled the 480 at the Geneva Motor Show in 1986, plenty of buyers believed they were looking at something genuinely special. What they actually got was one of the automotive industry's most convincing examples of false advertising by design. Because the 480 spent an extraordinary amount of time looking sporty, while making absolutely no effort to behave like one. At first glance, it seemed promising enough. The low nose looked futuristic. The glass hatchback gave it a sleek, almost exotic profile. The cabin wrapped itself around the driver in a way that felt far more ambitious than most Volvos of the period. Everything about the car appeared to be making the same promise. This is going to be fun. Then you drove it, and almost immediately realized the styling department and engineering department had clearly stopped speaking to each other at some point during development. Volvo sourced the 480's 1.7-litre engine from Renault, a decision that quickly became a source of frustration for many owners. Reliability complaints appeared early, electrical faults became common discussion topics, and mechanical dependability rarely matched the reputation buyers expected from a Volvo. Which was awkward, because reliability was supposed to be Volvo's thing. Then there was the handling. For a car that looked like a sports coupe, the 480 displayed a remarkable commitment to understeer. Push into corners and the front tyres quickly begin negotiating surrender terms with the road surface. The steering provided little encouragement. The chassis never felt eager, and the harder you drove, the more obvious it became that this was a stylish hatchback desperately pretending to be something more exciting. The numbers themselves weren't terrible. The 1.7-litre engine produced 108 brake horsepower, enough to reach 60 miles per hour in 9.5 seconds, and eventually 118 miles per hour. The trouble was that the car looked like it should have been doing all of those things with considerably more enthusiasm. It's a bit like turning up to a rock concert and discovering the headline act is an accountant. And that was the real disappointment. The 480 wasn't awful. It was worse than that. It was misleading. Every exciting feature seemed to lead directly toward compromise. The looks promised performance. The Volvo badge promised durability. The futuristic image promised innovation. Instead, buyers received reliability concerns, heavy understeer, and a driving experience that never lived up to the drama of the styling. In 1986, the Volvo 480 looked like the future. Unfortunately, it drove like an apology. Three countries, three manufacturers, three completely different failures. Tell us which one you'd have avoided. If you enjoy the stories on Four Wheels and Fuel, you can support the channel through Buy Me a Coffee. Link is in the description. And on that bombshell, this is Four Wheels and Fuel. See you next time.